So hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar today with the Clinician Engineer Hub, bridging the gap between clinical medicine and engineering. And I'm really excited to have Thomas Ridgeway here with us this evening. Now, Thomas is a health tech executive and board advisor. He's also a graduate from the Oxford University Said Business School. Now, Thomas will introduce himself more formally, but in brief, he has significant experience in the healthcare space, particularly from the management perspective, within tertiary academic NHS centres. And he's also branched up in the startup domain and has launched various companies of his own within healthcare. So Thomas, great to have you with us here this evening. How are you doing?
Thank you ever so much, Neil. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion this evening.
Fantastic. So for today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on innovation and enterprise. I think it's a really interesting set of topics, particularly for clinician engineers in this space. And I think what's interesting is innovation means different things to lots of people, and it means something to me. I'm sure it means something to you, Thomas. What do you understand by the concept of innovation? Because we hear this term all the time, and people say lots of, different elements of innovation. Be interesting to hear from yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and I think really it often for me it usually changes between who I'm talking to.
Sure.
Innovation is such a broad concept, and if I speak with those on the R&D side of the spectrum with innovation, and for them, innovation often, in order to engage them with the concept of innovation, it means breaking, it means doing things that no one's ever done before. It's like
Mhm.
it's kind of like, you're really, really, really boundary pushing on either some kind of technical edge. However, having spent 10 years as a senior manager in the NHS prior to becoming an entrepreneur,
Sure.
I guess I really form a more broad view of innovation. And innovation is, for me, is enabling change from the status quo way of doing it. And that can be really quite rudimentary technology or changes. I mean, even things such as, as a clinician, a change in the way you wash your hands.
Yeah,
Right. Well,
sure.
that's an innovation,
Mhm.
you know, and how you go from one innovator to a handful of early adopters to the early majority to the late majority and then to the laggards, how you go through that cycle of adoption, for
Mhm.
me that is actually what innovation is. It's taking you it's anything where you have identified there's a better way of doing it
Mhm.
and you need to change from the status quo. For me, that's what innovation is. Um, and
Yeah,
there's some really, really far end spectrum parts, and then there's some stuff which is just changing some basics that have been there forever.
yeah.
But you make a change and it makes a difference. There you go. I don't think
No,
that necessarily
I
aligns with any kind of like academic framework, but for me, I think that that's everyone has the capability of being an innovator. Change the status quo, a positive change to the status quo at any level on anything. That's innovation. And it's hard. It's really hard. Like you can change your status quo but to change a system's status quo, that's really hard work.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. We'll delve into that shortly. I mean, I think you described it beautifully because I think a lot of people assume that innovation is, well, here's a new product, here's a new device, if you're thinking in sort of the medical sense. But you described very nicely that it could just be a novel process or a change in the service, for
Absolutely.
example, the hand washing process. And I think a lot of people kind of forget that. We see a lot of movement in devices and development, and I think I agree with you. Innovation doesn't necessarily have to be that. It could be focusing on the process and service. And I think what you also alluded to is that there's a value element. So certainly if you're improving the process of hand washing, the value is it's insane that you're going to reduce infection massively within a hospital.
Absolutely.
So I really
Absolutely.
agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And often it is those and we see this particularly in large organizations or often for ourselves, we've become comfortable doing them a particular things a particular way.
Yes, totally.
And that some of those daily habitual status quos for us, our colleagues, everyone, which you do without thinking, disruption to that it can be really challenging in terms of well why make that difference? I mean, slightly off topic here, but my I have a 7-year-old daughter who absolutely loves horrible histories, right? Now there's a few episodes on horrible histories where they have Florence Nightingale,
Oh yeah.
and it kind of like it depicts the resistance that Florence Nightingale faced in trying to
Yes.
introduce medics to wash their hands between patients and in basic hygiene and things. And you could just kind of
The
like,
obvious one.
that kind of like, it's a really big example out there, but it's kind of like that. Well, what difference is it going to make? How do we prove to people
Mm.
this, albeit small change? Hey, just go to that sink and wash your hands. Albeit that small change is going to make a massive, massive difference
Mm,
to
so
patient outcome.
beautiful.
So for me,
Absolutely.
I think kind of like, you know, what Florence Nightingale did for hygiene, well, that's definitely an innovation. She didn't come up with a product. She didn't come up with hey, look, here's
No.
my patented here's my patented device that helps save patients. No, it was kind of like it was hand
Basic.
hygiene. So all the way through those spectrums, and all the way up to like the robotic surgeries and things like that we see today. It is a change, trying to introduce those sorts of things as status quo. But yeah, I completely agree with you. Process process is probably where the biggest innovation change happens. Products,
Fantastic.
absolutely, but changing in process is big. And actually, it's hard to think of a medical product that
Mm.
doesn't a new medical product that does not require some degree of process change.
Absolutely. No, I
Often
agree.
the implementation of a new product is the hardest bit. How do we change the way we work in order to make this possible? And an example of that would be,
Go ahead. Yeah.
oh goodness, a long, long time ago. This would have been my first year as an NHS manager. We introduced TAVI,
Mhm.
for cardiology, so valve replacement, so you can you'll know far more about how it technically works than I do. But
That's very good. Yeah.
rather than a cardiac surgeon opening up a patient to do a valve replacement, you're able to do it going through interventional cardiology means, whereby you effectively go through the body's plumbing system with
Yeah.
an incision in the leg or wherever else, and then you feed it through and it opens out. Well, I remember, kind of like an absolutely astonishing product innovation,
Mhm.
but the process innovation required to actually put that product into practice was enormous.
Mhm.
It's like this,
Imagine.
we were changing a procedure done by one specialty group to a procedure to be done by a brand new specialty group. It
Yeah.
required the creation of new pathways, and the implementation, honestly, it was a couple of years work in order
Just
to
on the
be
processing.
able to, yeah, just in terms of the process, just in terms of, right, how do we change our cath labs such that we're equipped for this process? So
That's
that I think that process innovation it's a key bit. It's a really, really, really key bit, and it's something that I think touches um, all clinicians looking to make a change in their environment.
Mhm.
You won't just be able to reintroduce a product. You will have to think about, well, what's the process innovation that supports this product?
Yeah, and I think the resource element certainly on the process, you need the people, you need the backing of lots of stakeholders. And I think that sort of leads me on to my next question is in terms of innovation, could be a product, but we're very much interested in process and service. What happens, say, when you have a great product or a new process, and then people just seem disinterested? It's kind of put to one side. And exactly like you said, a long time back, hand washing, very effective. No one really bought into the idea. I think the resistance element, when you are trying to put forward an innovation, for me is very frustrating. And you can talk to multiple stakeholders and get knockbacks, and then you think, right, well, I'm just not going to bother. How do you deal with that sort of resistance from your experience? I see you smile.
Yeah, it's kind of like, how do I deal with it? Well, probably not very effectively would be the honest answer. I think I get as frustrated as other people do.
Mhm.
And I don't think I can really offer any kind of like, hey, if you are being hit by wave after wave of resistance, here's a way to knock through it. I think, there's a lot of interpersonal skills that go on and understanding the stakeholders and where they are. And, sometimes you have to do it one person at a time, and you build your champions, your champions with influence that
Yeah,
then influence others. There's only so much you can do, and certainly, I spoke at the start about this. You as the innovator, well, you need to persuade the early adopters. Okay.
absolutely.
And the difficulty is that I think often innovators feel they have to persuade the majority.
Mhm.
It's generally, from what I've seen, it is that innovator persuading the early adopters become evangelical
Yeah.
about it. And those evangelical early adopters, they're the ones that persuade the early majorities, and it's a cascade effect.
Okay,
It's
yes. Yeah, the snowball,
so
yeah.
I think certainly a focus on who are the people that are sharing your passion, who are your early adopters,
Mhm.
and working with them for them to cascade out. I think that's an approach that can help a lot. However, one of the key things I do think, and you mentioned about timing,
Yeah.
I think timing is a really, really, really important bit. There are a lot of innovations where it's a brilliant, brilliant product or a brilliant change, but now is not the right
The right
time.
time. Yeah, of course.
Um, and I think for me, specifically with the NHS, it's very. I'm not,
Tricky
we can
time
be
with the
relatively
NHS.
candid on. We can be relatively candid on here and say there is a lot of unmet need.
Mhm.
All right, there is a lot of unmet need. We know that there is so much more that we could do for patients if we had one doctor per patient, if we had every single possible device, every single drug, every single bit of resource out there,
Yeah.
we could do better, right? So by that, in terms of like the potential of if you had everything to what we have now, there's unmet need. Okay.
Mhm.
Therefore, pretty much every innovation can prove beneficial to a patient. Right?
Absolutely.
It just can. There must be over 1 million ways you could improve something. But clearly you can't invest in that, right? There has to be a selection process that goes on. And that really falls into the, you know, NHS clinical and administration process in terms of deciding, well, what receives both capital investment if it's a capital investment project, but
Yeah.
also what receives attention investment. Because I'm sure been you've experienced where things seem to change a lot in the organization and people are weary of change and fatigue. You get
Mhm.
change fatigue. We talk about how
I think
nothing
there's a
changes,
fear
but then we
element.
also talk on the other hand about how things keep changing all the time and people are change
Yes.
fatigued. So certainly as an organization and as a hospital administrator, you used to have to be very conscious of, have we got energy as a collective
Mhm.
group to do another big staffing change? It may well have been, we've changed a rota structure, we've changed wards around, we've built a new unit over there. That's required process change. Or we've implemented a new treatment, which has required process change to other staff.
Mhm.
And people get change fatigued. So there has to be a selection process. And for some of the companies I've worked with, um, I think that they have really, really done amazing jobs at focusing on the patient benefit. Really amazing job at focusing on the patient benefit. And their time will come, right? Their time will come. The difference in terms of what then, for me, I see gaining traction is when there is an alignment to the customer. And it's just remembering that the patient isn't your economic buyer.
Totally.
Effectively, the NHS Trust, the organization, is your economic buyer. And finding where is the moment where your idea that aligns with patient need also aligns with the economic buyer's priorities, and for that being the NHS Trust priorities. And one of the things I often advise people to do is very reliably on the 23rd or 24th of December each year, NHS England publishes its priorities framework for the next, where it lists out 20 to 30 priorities that it says this is what we are going to measure each NHS trust about, and you need to build a plan for this in your annual plan. If your innovation aligns with one of those priority goals, you will find a lot of support within an organization, because you will find administrators like me that were there going, how on earth are we going to solve that priority? How are we going to demonstrate we have made progress on that priority? And someone coming along and saying, we've been working on something for a little while, but we believe solves that priority. I think it is so much of success, getting successful adoption of innovation is finding those moments of alignment. And sometimes you can create the alignment, and sometimes that alignment, you're just in the right place at the right time.
No, definitely. And I think you mentioned a lot of very good points there. So focusing certainly on themes that matter to NHS trusts, because that should be the problem you should aim to solve, and then getting the backing, the early adopters, and then hopefully everything snowballs. I would say one thing though, not to be negative, but when I talk about innovation within NHS trusts, I think, like you said earlier, there's sort of this fear element, or maybe people don't like to take risk. They view it as a bit sort of too disruptive, or too risky. There may be a sort of panic element, and I think they overthink it, that the risk isn't as bad as they may, think it to be, but it's very difficult to change their mindset. Have you ever been in a situation where, you've come across a group of stakeholders who are not so innovative, and then you've kind of, educated them about how to become innovative, so to speak? Because, there's various steps that you can take, not a method, but certain things that you can encourage to then, I find people are a bit more embracing to the concept. It's not all dangerous. It's not all disruptive. Not all hell's going to break loose. We take things in steps and then reassess. What would your advice be to sort of take someone who's not really an innovative person by their mindset, but then eventually sort of embraces the concept? What kind of teaching could you offer in that regard? Because I think that feeds in with the sort of buy-in process.
I think I'm not sure I could identify anyone I have felt is not an innovative person, if I'm honest with you. I think there's absolutely people with greater and lesser risk appetite.
Yeah.
But I think that I really am struggling to think of a person that I have come across that has been not open to change on anything. They may not have been open to my change that I'm proposing,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't say that they're not open to change on
Totally.
anything.
Okay.
And I think perhaps holding that in mind, because people are open to change if the change feels safe.
So
So
emphasize the
I
safety.
think that, yeah, I think so. I think it is a trying to create an environment where you present something in a way that it feels safe for the person to say yes. So that may well be saying, hey, look, can we just try this for half an hour?
Yeah.
Can we try this once? Can we try, can we pilot this so we can reverse out of it?
Makes sense.
Or using examples of, hey, look, this has been done over here and it's worked well. So then they don't feel they're taking that first plunge in terms of they're not, if this doesn't work, they're not going to be made to look stupid of why did you do that? That was just blatantly stupid. So I think kind of like the more you can make the change feel safe, and rather than you're gonna go from, you're gonna go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. And once it starts, it's done. There's nothing, you're committed, you're fully in. That's a really scary change to present to someone, terrifying change to present to someone. If you can get someone to just say, do you mind if we just try this once? Then I think that's quite, then I think that can be quite good. The other thing, and I'm not sure this is necessary.
More of a pilot element.
Yeah, pilots often help people feel I can handle a pilot, and giving them the kills and giving them the kill switch as well, and just saying, look, the moment you're not comfortable with this, we stop. You have control of the kill switch, right? And the more you can create those tools that enable your cautious stakeholder to feel safe, that helps a lot. I joined the NHS on the NHS graduate management scheme, and I remember Sir David Nicholson was the chief executive of the NHS in that at that time, and he had come along to the 100 or so new graduate management trainees that had been recruited. And I think someone asked him a relatively similar question about, how do you create change? And he said, sometimes you have to ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
All right. Okay. Nice way.
Now, I think that can be a dangerous message, and it wouldn't be the first time I would go for something. But thinking about, well, you know what? Can I be my early adopter?
Yeah.
If I do this a different way, what does that do? Can I be an example to myself and then an example to others? Can I ask, you may well, and hand washing is a great, it's a great one to process change, but maybe you have done so, you've read a paper about a new technique on hand washing, right? You've read a new paper on it. Well, rather than going to the infection control team saying, hey, I'd like to try this new technique, and you go through months and months and months of them doing evaluations and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Maybe that's something that for you as an individual is a safe personal disruption, but you're then able to prove to yourself, actually, I can feel my hands feel cleaner than they've ever felt. And I actually, you get that blue dye and stuff. And I did this blue dye, and rather than it taking 30 seconds to clean off this full blue dye, it took me 10 seconds with this other technique. You kind of prove some stuff to yourself, and you start implementing it in, and so on and so forth. And then, someone says, oh, but you're not following guidance, and you ask for forgiveness rather than permission. That's probably some dangerous advice. I think, be certainly for those on the clinical side of it, be really, really cautious. From me and my administrator side, where it was more of a, how we schedule theatre sessions, how we schedule clinic sessions, how we do some other parts. The disruption that we might cause perhaps is a bit more safe, whereas certainly where there is a risk of patient harm on the other side, clearly you do need to have suitable steps on there. But I do think there are times where that applies, and asking for permission, asking for forgiveness sometimes is the last resort if it's something you're very, 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 very passionate in. But make sure it's very safe. Don't leave yourself too exposed on it. But first and foremost is make the change feel safe, make the change feel reversible, and go from there.
That's really great advice. Thanks so much. Now, I know you have a particular interest in your innovation and enterprise space around the concept of the 24/7 entrepreneur. What do you actually mean by that?
Well, I guess, I guess this is it. It's certainly for people considering becoming entrepreneurs, and also in pursuits of considering co-founders for future ventures. I often float the concept of this. You need to be prepared to be a 24/7 entrepreneur. And it comes from I used to do quite a lot of row. Well, it is, but it's different to what you imagine. So I used to do quite a bit of rowing, and in pursuits of trying to be quite good at it, a coach introduced the concept of the 24/7 athlete, where you go, look, you're going to do 3-4 hours training a day, but you need to be an athlete 24/7. You need to be making sure you are eating correctly. You need to be making sure you are sleeping correctly. You need to be making sure you are not over exerting in other things. You can't be doing this training and then going and running a marathon afterwards, because you'll go into fatigue too fast. You have to be focused on your goal 24/7, right? So it is a 24/7, it's a 24/7 pursuit. I think that applies a lot into entrepreneurship. I think there is a lot about, well, what are the environments you create for yourself to think when you're not working? You could be an entrepreneur working a couple of hours a day. There's plenty that do. There's plenty that do. Equally, many entrepreneurships pursuit will take 100-hour weeks. Okay, so there is a large spectrum in terms of your contact time. But one of the things I've seen really consistently in entrepreneurs that are successful is that their headspace is constantly on the thing that they are doing. It's like, if you are being disruptive, if you are creating change, if you are bringing a product to market and it's yours. If you stop being passionate about it, it dies. Well, there is something about, it's what you dream about. It's what you think about during the moments of rest. And you can, through those moments, what you choose to do in those moments of rest, in terms of what do you choose to do to reinvigorate yourself? What do you choose to do to inspire yourself? What are the things that you're reading? What are the things that you're consuming? Who are you spending time with? All of these things make a difference to your confidence, your headspace, your capacity to do the contact time work. Whether you've got capacity for 100-hour-a-week contact time work or 10-hour-a-week contact time work, wherever it is. But I think that for entrepreneurs to be successful, there is a need to embrace the concept of the 24/7 entrepreneur, and you need to be prepared that it will dominate your headspace. And it's more kind of like a warning of, are you ready for this? That this is going to be the thing you go to sleep thinking about, wake up thinking about, probably dream about, and the impact on those surrounding you in your life, that they're not your first thought. And that's a real, it's kind of like, it is really, really, really intense. But I think that I think for me, there's something in it that you don't need to be ready to pull in at all hours, but you do need to
but
be
it's
ready
there.
for how much headspace
Yeah.
your pursuit is going to occupy.
No, I agree with you. I mean, sort of from my perspective, I certainly think about my ventures all the time. It's kind of always at the back of my mind. And I think
Yeah.
one of the limitations is, say, if you and I are thinking about a particular innovation or entrepreneurial type activity, I think you touched upon a very interesting theme. Who are the people surrounding us? Who are they in terms of the enterprise? Do they share the same passion? And if the passion dies or there's maybe conflict between people on the team, I think it makes life very, very difficult, because there's certainly moments when sort of I've experienced that, and then you're kind of pushing along the concept by yourself. Um, have you ever been in that situation where maybe in your startup arenas and spaces, you've kind of had this 24/7 passion, but then other members in your team have kind of lost interest or become fatigued?
I've been really, really, really fortunate with the co-founders I've worked with in the
Mhm.
past, in terms of the 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 drive for the mission has continued. Um, I have been in situations where there are people that I have wanted to work with, and
Yeah.
we just never built momentum. It's like we never created the momentum for it. So I've certainly been there. I
And was that
I think, and
okay?
I saw something presented by Y Combinator.
Okay.
For those that aren't familiar, Y Combinator is they're a fund. It's a VC fund that's very, very entrepreneur friendly. It's a very competitive process out in San Francisco to get on, and they release some really good material actually in terms of advice for founders and entrepreneurs. So I'd really recommend checking out that
No, it's
resource.
good.
Um, but I remember seeing something where they were saying that the number one cause of entrepreneurship failure is founder disagreement, is the founders falling out
Also, yeah.
and not being able to resolve their differences. And how do you guard against that? Um, and I've been really tempted to as well. There are people I absolutely love spending time with. I really love spending time with them. But for some reason, it's almost like our enjoyment spending time with each other
Mm.
sometimes trumps the mission. It's like when the mission gets difficult,
Fair
we
enough.
enjoy spending time with each other, and so you build up a lack of momentum. And then there's others where you just kind of go, I really don't, these aren't people I'd want to,
Spend time with.
spend my leisure time with.
Yeah.
But actually, we're really effective. We're really, really effective together.
Mm.
I have seen in some friends' ventures where they have found that balance in terms of they work with someone they really, really like. But then they hit a disagreement point, and that disagreement point just it really, really damages them. They haven't been able to work through it.
Oh,
Um,
gosh, yeah.
I do think that there is almost a you need to you need to know that somewhere in your entrepreneurship journey, you are going to have a significant falling out with a co-founder. It is inevitable.
Been there, done
It
that.
is it is it is just inevitable. The pressure is
Mm.
very high. Even if it's just pacing, it's not necessarily like you now disagree about the mission. It may well just be pacing in terms of going, I one person wants to push for something this quarter, another one is going, look, we need to push this back because there is just not the heads.
Yeah.
It can be anything. It can even be, sometimes it can be trivial stuff down to like you've outgrown a current place and now you're looking for a new office and someone doesn't like that off.
Yes.
They can often be trivial things. I think that one of the things I caution a little bit is, have you and your co-founder ever had a significant falling out? And if they haven't, there's almost a, well, do you know how to constructively disagree with each other in order to get to a positive outcome? Because there are some people you do, and it's where you're unable to do that. It's like your friendship is because you really, really, really like each other. If there's a big disagreement and you can't work through it, it can destroy the whole thing. So I would almost, I actually gave this advice to someone a short time ago, where there's three friends about to start an enterprise together, and they love spending time with each other. The reason why they're doing it's kind of like they came up with a we want to build something so that we can spend time with each other working, and then found a thing to do. And I shared with them an anxiety that they might struggle at a point where they fall out, and they might want to create an environment early on where there's a high likelihood of you're going to fall out and you're going to need to work through your differences and figure out a way to do it. And I suggested to them that they go on a wilderness camping holiday together, because I don't think I've ever seen anyone go on a wilderness camping holiday and not fall out at some part across the week, just in terms of you're hungry, you're tired, you're wet, you're cold. Preferably do it kind of like in like October, November time, somewhere in the UK where it's just quite it's quite miserable. You're all getting on top of each other. Someone's going to fall out, and it's just like, were you able to get through this and find a positive way forward, enjoy this pleasure of it, or did someone throw it, effectively throw their teddy out the pram and go, I'm going home?
Yes.
And has ran away. And it's like, I'm like, that might be an indication for something, but equally it's a confidence builder of, when you do then hit the inevitable disagreement, maybe a year down the line, you go, hey, we've worked through problems before. We're going to be able to work through this. Remember that camping trip where we had to, where, you almost grabbed the camping knife. Well,
definitely hope that doesn't happen.
We worked through that, and now we can work through this. It's just the same.
No, that's really helpful. And I think, for today's webinar on innovation and enterprise, you've really touched upon a lot of fantastic themes from a learning perspective. I agree with you entirely. So innovation, certainly disrupting the status quo, always make sure what you're doing is safe. Doesn't necessarily have to be a product. It can be a process or a service. And I really like sort of your thought process about the 24/7 entrepreneur. It's always there, right? Always either when you're wide awake.
Always in your head. It's always
there.
It's always taking some of your energy.
No, definitely. And then, of course, whenever there's people, there's bound to be conflicts, and what is the best way. And I like that sort of saying at the start, we will fall out. So let's try and figure a way to prepare ourselves for that. Any final take-home messages for the audience? They're now probably all revved up, ready to innovate and work through, all their enterprise work.
You know what? Just get going.
Just get going.
Just kind of like go, if there's something you want to do, take the first step, dip your first toe. You don't have to dive in head first. I think that's the key. Diving in head first is really, really, really scary. You don't have to dive in head first. Dip your toe and then get carried away.
Fantastic. I like that. It's time for toe dipping, everyone. So Thomas, it's been a pleasure. We'll share all this great material online very shortly. And that's it for today's webinar with the Clinician Engineer Hub. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.